60th anniversary event of the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain. There's a lot of great activities here throughout the day. We're trying to do something a little bit different today, a little bit unique, and that is to show how did Civil War units and officers of those units communicate with each other during the Civil War over very long distances. Didn't have TikTok, didn't have cell phones, didn't have GPS, right? Not landlines, nothing. How'd they do it? How did Sherman move troops from Chattanooga down here exactly where he needed them to be? It's amazing. They had 4 different types of communication that they used. Okay, one was just couriers. Officer would write a message, give it to the courier, and he'd walk. Right? How far could that go? Maybe 20 miles in a day, a whole 24-hour period. So it took a long time. Then they had couriers with horses, right? But still, several hours to cover 20 miles. You had to get over streams. Sometimes there'd be obstacles, whatever. Horses is tired, you have to rest it. So it took a while. The other ways were what we call signaling. All right. One of those ways would be torches at night when it's dark. The other way was with a signal flag, which we have here. This is a real replica of a Union Army signal flag. Now, how many folks are in the technology industry? Do IT work? I bet there's somebody here.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. There you go. So how is code written in computer language? It's binary code, right? Zeros and ones. Guess what? They had a binary code here. Ones and twos. So by stringing together ones and twos with a flag, you can create letters, numbers, words, and in fact, total phrases. There was actually a third one. Ones and twos and threes. So we're going to show those actually. 3 was end of message. And so that was it. Now you notice I'm dressed as a cavalry officer, junior cavalry officer. That's intentional because most of the Signal Corps in the Civil War were cavalry. Think about it. They had to get up and move to various locations quickly. The only way to do that was on a horse. There's another way that they would communicate as well. We're not going to necessarily demonstrate that today, but we're going to talk about it. And that's telegraph. And that was used extensively in the Civil War for the first time in military combat in an extensive way. William Tecumseh Sherman was a master of communication. That was his big advantage, in addition to the resources, and telegraph in particular. He had actually strung telegraph all the way from Chattanooga as he went south, following his army all the way to Atlanta. In fact, after the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain on June 27, 1864, just a day or two ago, 160 years ago, he was actually, after that, he was in Marietta, near the train depot there, where there was a telegraph office. So that's where he conducted all of the, and sent orders for all of his armies. Okay. Now, you might say, what's a Union unit doing up here at Kennesaw Mountain anniversary where this would have actually been covered with Confederates? Well, because after the battle, the Confederates withdrew and the Union took over this position. This is the highest point and around the whole Georgia area here. This was a perfect place to have a signal station. And so this became the center of Union communications after the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain until Sherman actually left to go to Savannah for his march to the sea. This is a very important place. In fact, the signals that were communicated to send reinforcements at Allatoona Pass, the Battle of Allatoona Pass, just north of here, on October 4th, 1864, came through this signal point, probably within a couple hundred yards of where we're standing today. Okay, so let me tell you the other thing. How do you cover large distances? You can't see a flag that far, right? They would have relay stations. One signal port flag to a point, they would signal to the next, and so on. Sometimes they would mix communication. You'd have torches, signal flag, telegraph, whatever. It's amazing how far you can cover and how fast. So let's talk about Allatoona Pass. A couple days before the battle, about October 3rd, a large infantry unit of Confederates moved up and captured a small contingent of Union infantry, about 250 men, in Atwood. So now they knew that the Confederate Army was on the run. They were moving, they were advancing north. They were going to take Allatoona Pass because that was a communication choke point for supply for Sherman's army after the Battle of Atlanta was over. So whoever took that, he could cut off Sherman completely. So that was an important issue. Lieutenant Colonel Tortolet had a small contingent, about 800 men at the altitude pass guarding it. He knew he was going to be attacked by a large Confederate force. He sends a flag signal from his mountaintop position there through a series of relay stations to this point. They pick it up and flag signal to Marietta, just 5 or 6 miles from here. All right, that whole distance is about 20 miles. Sherman picks it up and says, well, I better send some troops. He telegraphs all the way up to Rome, which is 50 miles away. General course, get your guys on a train and get them to altitude pass fine, quickly. And that's exactly what he did. And that he was able to send that message in only a couple of hours, 70 miles, through multiple connection points. Of course, did load his troops, did get them there on time, doubling the size of the Union force and preventing a Confederate victory. So that's a perfect example of how communication worked. Okay? So let's talk about signaling itself. Sergeant. So he would be in a ready position, normally. And then he would start to signal first that he's going to send a signal. We're going to do that in a moment. And we'll wait for the other receiving end to signal back the same thing. I hear you, and I'm ready to receive the signal. Okay? Then we'll send a series of 1s and 2s. Show us a 1. To our right, his left. Okay? That's a 1. Now a 2. Okay? Hopefully you see that. And then when he's done with the message, he'll send a 3. Show us a 3, sir. Turns sideways and goes like that. We're done. Then we'll wait for a response. Okay? Make sense? So let's say we're here and the commanding officer has said, officer, and I'm an officer, I've got the red crimson sash, which they did wear in the Civil War so that soldiers could see who the officers were on the battlefield. And my really, natty bow tie here. They actually did wear those, believe it or not. But he would send a message to me, cavalry attack. We want the cavalry stationed out there to attack a position. We're going to send that message. Okay? Also, you notice I have a satchel here. Look, it's in here. All cavalry, signal officers would have this. In here would be a signal book. If you look at it, it has all the codes. 1s and 2s, different words. See that? So I look at my book, cavalry, that's 4 1s. We're going to send 4 1s, then pause. Then we're going to say attack. Attack is 3 1s. So 4 1s, stop, 3 1s. And then we'll wait to see for the reply. The reply is message received and understood. That's 3 A's. And A is 2 1s. So 2 stop, 2 stop, 2 stop. When we get that, we know we've communicated with us. Okay? Make sense?
Right.
Now, this is an actual period set of binoculars. I've actually used these yesterday with the humidity a little bit differently. We could actually see that soldier a mile plus away. I'm not going to use those today. Old man with bad eyes. We've got some 24th century optics. A little bit better, but hopefully we can see that man sitting down there. Okay.
So what was, I guess, the distance between communication points for the flag?
Depended on the weather and terrain, but it could be as little as a half mile, sometimes a mile and a half.
Okay.
So to go all the way
about the furthest
altitude,
distance.
there would be several relay stations. But you see how fast you can communicate long distances in a few minutes. It's really amazing.
And they didn't have smog to contend with.
Didn't have smog.
Clearer.
It's clear. That is a big problem today. Library hazy. All right, sir. Shall we see if we can signal our man? All right.
Oh, okay.
Over there by the racetrack.
And this soldier has another book like this, and as I call out the message, he's going to write it down. 1, 2, 1, 2, right? Thank you, sir. Now, these things are...
So we're looking for a red flag out there.
I don't see him. No. He's looking for one through the binoculars.
So he's looking for the binoculars, and we're going to see what he said.
Do you see him, sir?
I can see him. He is there.
So he's waving a flag. Do you see anybody with a red flag way out there?
signaling he's ready for your message. Send the message, cavalry attack.
You think there's a flag out there? There's someone with the flag way over there.
Oh yeah.
You see it?
Not really.
Not really.
What's the time rate?
What's that? Just pretend? I don't know. I'll be real. I don't see that somebody. He's looking for him.
You see it?
No, I don't see where he is.
He's down by the racetrack where that construction site is, where the dirt is. He's about a mile from here.
He's down by the.
There's someone here with the flag who might be way over there.
Is he to the left, you think? Or?
To his right,
Can
I
you
believe.
see him?
Yeah.
You can see him?
Waving. 1, 2, 1, 1. 1, 1.
You see that?
Can you guys
One.
do me a favor and
Message
just
received
do
and
this?
understood.
Yes, I'm sorry.
That's
Sure,
all.
absolutely.
Can you point to where he's at?
Sure, I'll show you. Want to take a look?
Yeah.
Stand
Okay.
up on your ground.
Hopefully he doesn't walk away. So, you all see the racetrack there.
He's going to start probably giving people a
Okay,
chance
great.
to look.
Thank you.
In front of it.
See if I can get him. He wouldn't see.
Right in the He should be that way.
Yeah, go ahead.
He's there. He did what? He's done. That's what it is. He's telling the cavalry to attack. Okay? He said he should be waving it. He told him to stay and keep waving it. Yeah. I'm looking about the red too. Yeah. He's actually on the green grass back there where that little office building is. One story. We're going to be going down the hill. You see him? See him? See that? Yeah, you can see him.
Okay, I'm just making sure because I know you got to like all the way down.
We have to look at the secret.
It's amazing.
We don't.
So, yeah.
Fine.
And then I got to go all the way to
All right, folks, as the battery gathers real quick, want to go ahead and welcome you here to Kennesaw Mountain National Battlefield Park. And on behalf of the National Park Service, we want to say welcome to this commemoration of the 160th battle anniversary. Now, this is a live fire program. So we ask that at all times you stay right here, please. We're going to fire twice during this program. Once to start the program and once to conclude the program. And in between, I'm going to be talking to you about cannons here at the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain. Now, when you hear the gunners give the command ready, that means that they are getting ready to shoot. And you may want to take appropriate precautions and cover your ears. Also, hold on to any pets, as the sudden discharge of the gun may startle them. And if you have any young children, please go ahead and cover their ears as well. So at this time, we're going to go ahead and turn it over to our lieutenant, who's in command of the battery. Hey, go!
Yeah, you can if you want. He'll be all right.
Sorry.
Oh.
They're fine. They're fine up there.
Ready?
Yeah. Ready.
That's worth clapping for. Well, again, let me welcome you to Kennesaw Mountain National Battlefield Park. And what you just saw there was a Union artillery battery. Now, as you tour Kennesaw Mountain Battlefield, and you go to all the historic sites, you're going to read the term, a battery of cannons did this, and a battery of cannons did that. In the Union Army, a battery of cannons is 6 cannons commanded by a captain. In the Confederate Army, it is 4 cannons commanded by a captain. And there were a plethora of batteries here at the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain. The Union Army, who were dressed as we are today in blue, the United States Army, they had with them 254 cannons under General William T. Sherman. Additionally, they had 110,000 troops. The Confederate Army under Joseph E. Johnston had about 65,000 troops, and he had right around 170 cannons, and this battle could be heard as far away as Atlanta as a rumble in the background. Now, where you are right now, there were no cannons during the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain on June 27, 1864. Because this is actually a terrible place to be. Because we are right now between the lines. The Confederate line is just a little ways up behind the Georgia Monument. For those of you who have ever walked up Kennesaw Mountain, you know how it goes flat for a second, then it starts going up and you start questioning your life choices? That's roughly where the outer works of the Confederate line were. The Union Army is just across what is now Old Highway 41. So this will be a terrible place to be on the 27th of June. But the story of Kennesaw Mountain, actually the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain happens before the 27th of June. You see, what's happening is Sherman, he's moving into Georgia with his troops in early May of 1864. He's traveling along the railroad. He needs those rail supplies from Chattanooga, Tennessee. And he's moving farther south. And Johnston is defending the state. And here's the way it works. It's actually quite simple. Johnston has less troops, so he entrenches his troops on high ground across the railroad. So if Sherman wants to fight him, he's got to get out of his trenches, march in front of Johnston's trenches while getting shot at. Well, Sherman, he's no fool. He sees, well, the Confederates up on the high ground. I don't want to do this, and ends up going around the Confederate Army. Well, Johnston, he says, well, oh, there goes the Union Army, and he retreats so he doesn't get cut off from his supply line. And so from May to mid-June of 1864, both the armies are doing this move and counter-move until they get here. Now, the reason why we have the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain is quite simple. The Confederates put cannons up on top of Kennesaw Mountain. With cannons up on the mountain, you control the railroad, which is just, stay here long enough, it'll cut through. You'll hear it go. It is the same rail path today that it was during the Civil War. So after trying to go around, Sherman, he says, you know what? Let's do this. Let's attack and try and break through the Confederate line before they get across the Chattahoochee River and into the defenses of Atlanta. So he sets the date for June 27th. The morning opened hot and humid. Shocker for Georgia in late June, I know. I'll go ahead and answer your question right now. Yes, we are hot in these wool uniforms. Now, one of the interesting stories, though, as you tour the battlefield, one thing I want you to keep in mind, it wasn't a forest. It was somebody's home. So you have to understand, if you take, the battle maps of the battle and you color in the roads, this was almost like warfare came to suburbia. A lot of the trails that we have in this park, if you go on them long enough, they lead to the ruins of somebody's home. They lead to where people live. So the civilian population, many of them evacuated. They left before the battle, not knowing what they would come home to. Now, some civilians even stayed during the battle. One lady, Lucinda Hardage, talked about picking peas as the mini balls whistled over her head. And so you've got that impact, and all of a sudden you have 170,000 people moving into this area. So it becomes very tense just before the battle. Now, on the morning of the battle, General Sherman, he has more troops. So he is going to do a massive bombardment all along the line. He wants to blast those Confederate trenches that you see, break up the trenches, and then march in his infantry. That was for those of you who saw the demonstration. Those were the folks with the rifles. The idea is get them in there quickly, break through the line, and win a great victory for the United States Army. So as you tour our battlefield, you're going to go to those battle spots. The main battle area, though, that you need to go to, if you don't go there, you kind of miss the point, is tour stop number 5. That's called Cheatham Hill. That's where most of the battle, most of this true fighting took place. And one Confederate, he said he had known of men who had gone through the war and had never known they shot somebody. But he said on June 27th, at the place they called the Dead Angle, he said every man in the 1st Tennessee killed just a score of soldiers. He said it was only required to aim and point your weapon and you ended someone's life. See, what Sherman's going to do is he is going to create a human battering ram out of his soldiers. The idea being, when the first wave hits, then the next one, and then the next one to break through those entrenchments. And at one point, it got down to hand-to-hand fighting in the trenches. That same Confederate, he said, we threw rocks and beat them in their faces with sticks. And the Yankees did the same, and rocks came in upon us like a perfect hailstorm. They were using club muskets. People were firing so fast and often that many times before they could pour down the powder, the gunpowder was flashing in their guns. The cannons for the Union Army, they had to stay silent once the infantry marched out because they didn't like shooting over the heads of their own troops. But the Confederates, they had taken their cannons and in kind of a sneaky trick, they camouflaged them. They piled brush in front of their cannons, so while the Union Army was firing at them, they actually stayed silent because you saw how much smoke our guns make. What better way of saying, here I am, come shoot at me, than to fire your gun. So the Confederates waited till the Union soldiers were within 40 yards, and they opened up with a kind of cannonball called canister. It is a tin can packed full of iron balls. It is a large shotgun shell for this cannon. And when they're fired, all those balls fly out and they absolutely tear holes in the Union line. And it's through just sheer numbers. The Union Army is able, at one point, one of the colonels, Colonel Dan McCook, leaps up on the earthworks and tells his soldiers, forward the colors. And one of his soldiers pulls on his jacket and says, Colonel Dan, get down, they'll shoot you. And he says, attend to your own business. And he gets shot, falls off the earthworks, and is removed from the battlefield with a mortal wound. Another, a general, Brigadier General Charles Harper, sees that his attack is failing, leaps up on his white horse to spur his men on. Both sides are doing these amazing acts to try and either stop the Union attack or to keep the Union attack going. In the end, General Sherman, after about 45 minutes to an hour fighting, says, you know what? He looks to his Army commander, General George H. Thomas, and he says, hey, have you got one more attack in you? And he says, no, sir, 1 or 2 more such assaults would use up this army. But instead of the Union Army, completely retreating, they're actually going to dig in right in front of the Confederates. And for a few more days, they're going to be firing back and forth between the lines. At one point, they have to call a truce to bury the dead who are between the lines because the smell had gotten so bad in the heat. So at every place where Sherman tried to attack the Confederate line, he stopped. But what will work, folks, I'm going to need y'all to come up here. You're in front of the cannon, in front of the cannon bag. Need y'all to come up to the road or here into the road.
How many?
And so what will work, though,
okay.
is General Sherman is able to actually find a way around the Confederate Army. And by folks, y'all got to either go on the asphalt or up to the yellow rope, please. And Sherman is finally able to get around the Confederates. So even though technically the Confederates will win the battle, they will have to give away that victory and retreat off of Kennesaw Mountain. So we are going to fire one more time. Everybody stay right where you are. And remember, when the gunner says ready, cover your ears. Canister, load. Load.
Thank you for doing this, Dave.
No problem, hon. You know I got you. You just make sure
I'll pay.
Are we gonna go see Jason after this?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's Cheatham Hill next.
Okay.
At 2 o'clock. But
Okay.
we're going to go over there and take pictures.
Okay. For just taking pictures?
Well, after this one, it's like infantry demonstration at 11:30.
Okay.
It's my friend.
No, I know it. I know that.
Now, again, notice one of the guns is taking a little bit longer. That's called a 12-pound howitzer. There were a few of them left over during the Civil War, and they're notoriously difficult to load. They were kind of obsolete by this time period. Give these guys a hand. They've done a great job here today.
I'll just cut it when it actually starts. You know what I'm saying? So you just don't miss it.
Mm-hmm.
Shoulder. Arm. Close order. March. Order. Arm. All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And on behalf of Kennesaw Mountain National Battlefield Park, welcome. We are the 125th Ohio Volunteers. We're a reenacting and living history unit that loves the history of the Civil War, and we portray, as our name suggests, Union soldiers from the state of Ohio. And the original 125th fought here at Kennesaw Mountain over at Cheatham's Hill 160 years ago. So we're here talking about the daily life of the soldier, the weapons, the uniforms, and equipment. Much of what I'm going to say, though, even though we are Union soldiers, portraying that perspective, broadly applies to both sides. North and South, Union and Confederate, both sides had fairly similar military experiences to kind of broadly apply that. So the first thing I'd like to talk a little bit about is the uniform of the Civil War soldier. So, Corporal Rogers, front and center, please. So Corporal Rogers is uniformed like the typical Union soldier in what was then considered the Western Theater. Today, when we think about the West, we think of out to Kansas and beyond, right? Well, during the Civil War, the idea of the West is more like Tennessee, Georgia, Arkansas, Kentucky, that kind of general area. This side of Mississippi, in other words. And you'll, double over a word. His uniform is wool. Now you may be wondering, wool, why would you use wool in this kind of climate, right? It's very hot, very sweaty. Well, there's a number of reasons. Wool is very durable, so it's going to last a long time. It's going to stand up to the wear and tear. It can be easily dyed in uniform colors. It's flame resistant. So if there's a smoldering ember or something, and as you'll see with the weapons, that is a factor of being a Civil War soldier. It won't ignite. It will kind of just smolder, so it's sort of flame resistant. It will also help keep you warm in the winter. And the Army definitely thought it was more important to be warm in the winter than too hot in the summer. They said, we'd rather you not freeze, so you'll just have to be hot. So his uniform is wool. He has on his left hip a canvas bag that's been painted over with a tar material to help make it waterproof. This is his haversack. This is where he keeps his rations, his food, his hardtack, coffee, things that keep him going on a day-to-day basis. Now, the Army tried to be as mobile as possible, and so part of that was giving each soldier their own rations to carry. So the soldiers would be issued rations in lots of several days at a time. That way, every time, when we're on the march, it's time to have a meal, we don't have to pull out the wagon and break out the food and all this stuff. Everybody has their own food, their own sort of package on the march. He also has his canteen. It's a tin canteen, and it's covered in wool. Now, during the Civil War, it wasn't like they were going to the tap to fill up their canteens. They were taking their canteens and sticking them in creeks predominantly, or down wells, something along that line. So the outside wool covering would become damp as well, and that would help keep the water cooler longer, to help insulate the water. His hat is what's called a slouch hat, or a hardy hat. It's this wide brim style. We also have a soldier here in the front rank and another in the rear with a 4-inch cap. That's that sort of flat top. That's what most people think of when they think of Civil War headgear. But out here in the West, uniform regulations were much more lax. Both armies, North and South, were very much, no pomp and circumstance. We're here to do a job. And so they adopted practical methods of dress. And the wide brim hats are very practical. They help keep the sun off your face, the wind off your, or the rain off your back. Very, very useful type of headgear. He also has on his person several leather items. And all of those leather items, as you'll soon see, relate to his weapons system. He has a leather strap going across his shoulder that comes back to a box on his right hip. If he turns a little bit there. A leather box on his right hip. This is his cartridge box, where he keeps his ammunition for his musket. Turn back around. He also has a pouch where he keeps percussion caps for his musket. Again, more on that soon. And he has leather belt, leather bayonet, scabbard, and bayonet, which is a weapon that he can attach to the end of his musket for close quarters fighting. Thank you, Corporal. Yes, sir. So, life's a camping trip for the Civil War soldier. In addition to what Corporal Rogers is wearing, you might have a blanket and a gum blanket, which is sort of a water-resistant blanket all rolled together over yourself, and that's it. Everything you have, you're carrying on your back. And these guys really appreciated packing light and sort of living light, because everything they had to carry. They started to feel that pretty quick. So I alluded to the musket. The musket is a very heavy weapon, and it's about 9 pounds, and the soldiers were trained to carry the musket in various different orientations. That way they wouldn't have to have too much muscle strain carrying one way for a long period of time. If any of you have been in the service before, you're probably familiar. They called it the same thing then as they do now. It's called the Manual of Arms. Those are the steps that you go through to maneuver the musket in unison with your fellow soldiers. Now, I mentioned unison. The reason that's important is when you're lined up and fighting in close order like this, it's important that everybody sort of go together and stay in time together to avoid getting in each other's way. So we'll demonstrate some of the Manual of Arms. Attention, company. Shoulder, arms. Lift the musket up to the right shoulder. This is sort of like your first position. Everything comes from shoulder, arms. Right shoulder shift, arms. If we had to move quickly at the run, we could carry the musket up high and really lean into its weight and help control its weight. It also alleviates a lot of the strain on the elbow muscles. Shoulder, arms. Support, arms. Another way you can move it around on the opposite side, on your left side, carry the weight of the musket on your hammer. Shoulder, arms. I mentioned that soldiers were trained to fight in very close formations. They had to drill in those same formations. Company, from the halt. Left wheel, march. Left wheel. Left wheel. Volunteer army, folks. We're working on it. Left wheel. Yep, bring it on around. Bring it on around. Halt. To the rear, in open order, march. If we had to march under some trees or something like that, we could go to trail arms. You can see carrying the musket low, shoulder, arms. Black powder, which is the main propellant used in these firearms, is water sensitive, so you want to make sure that you keep your barrel dry. Secure arms. If we were in a rainstorm, the soldiers could carry their muskets turned around like that, muzzles down, so you don't get any moisture in there. You'll also notice that the soldiers put their thumb, if you'll turn a little bit here, on the ramrod. That prevents that ramrod sliding out. If you lose the ramrod, as you'll soon see, you basically have a useless weapon. That ramrod is essential to firing the musket. Okay. Shoulder, arm. Close order, march. Order, arms. Now, the soldiers were trained 9 steps. Getting ahead of myself. Private Win, front and center. I mentioned that the principal weapon of the Civil War was the rifled musket. Now, both of those words mean something very specific. Okay, it's a musket, which means it's loaded at the muzzle, the end of the barrel. But it's also rifled, and that's something kind of new in the Civil War. At least it's new for everyone to have a rifle. Before the Civil War, soldiers carried muskets. However, they were smooth bore. And what that means is the inside of the barrel in the old muskets, think about the Revolutionary War. They were just tubes, basically. They were like a pipe. And they fired a projectile much like this, which is a spherical lead ball. And the tolerances between this lead ball and those smooth barrels on the old muskets is very loose. So when you fired the old muskets, this ball would more or less bounce down the barrel, and they were very inaccurate, especially beyond 100 yards. Okay? But due to advances in manufacturing technology principally, now every soldier has a rifle. The difference is a rifle on the inside of the barrel, instead of it being smooth, it actually has grooves cut in spiral grooves on the inside of the barrel that impart a spin on the projectile. Another advancement was the development of this projectile. This is called a mini ball. It was invented by a Frenchman named Claude Binet, but of course we're Americans, so we call it a mini ball. And you'll notice, unlike the old musket ball, it's aerodynamic, pointed at the front. And it also has a concave base. The idea is when the gunpowder, the propellant, goes off behind this projectile, the gas will fill that concave base, expanding the soft lead base, engaging those rifle grooves, so that this thing comes out spinning. So you can think of the difference in weapon technology and accuracy. The old muskets before the Civil War, it's kind of like you're chucking a basketball. But now it's more like everybody's throwing a football with a perfect spiral. So it's much more accurate. Really, you could pretty consistently hit someone at twice the distance with the new weapon versus the old. Even an untrained soldier would be very effective with the new weapon. But it's still a musket, it's still a muzzle loader, and the soldiers were trained 9 specific steps on how to load the musket. The idea was everyone would know these steps in their sleep, and they could go through them in perfect choreography. The 9 steps are: right wind, load 9 times, load. He takes the musket, turns it around, points the muzzle away from his face. They were just as safety conscious then as we are today. He goes back on his right hip and reaches into his cartridge box. The next order is handle cartridge. He withdraws a paper cartridge. This is a blank round. However, if we were really fighting the war today, that would have that mini ball wrapped up inside in one complete package. Tear cartridge. With his 4 front teeth, he tears off the base of the cartridge, exposing the gunpowder. Pour cartridge. Pours the gunpowder down. Again, if there was a mini ball, he would push that in all as one unit.
draw rammers. He draws his ramrod, that important thing we mentioned earlier to hang on to. Ram cartridge. Rams the whole package home down to the breech of the musket. Return rammer. Prime. Now he's going to go back and he's going to pull the hammer back to half cock. It's kind of like putting on safety. He's going to reach in that cap pouch I mentioned earlier. He's going to pull out one of these. It's a percussion cap. The small brass cap, and much like a cap gun today, contains a pressure-sensitive chemical. It's fulminate mercury. He's going to pull that cap out. He's going to place it on the cone, which is a hole, a channel, underneath the hammer. So now when he pulls the trigger, the hammer's going to fall, apply pressure to that cap, and that's going to send a spark down that hole to ignite the main charge behind the mini ball. Shoulder, arm. Shoulder. So that's how the individual soldier operated their weapon. But I'm an officer. My weapon, even though I have some sidearms, my main weapon is actually the company. My job is to effectively direct the fire of other soldiers. And there were various ways to do that depending on the situation. Attention, company. Shoulder, arm. From the hall. Left wheel, march. Forward, march. Halt. Now, they were taught to train, or they were taught and trained to load in the 9 times, but when we're actually in combat, these men already know all those steps. They know it cold. They can do it in their sleep. And all I need to say is, load. Now you'll notice the men are formed up in 2 ranks. A rank is a long line, so we're going long ways. File is sort of the short ways line. So they have to do this all in very close proximity to each other. So that's where that training comes in. You'll also notice that the men in the rear rank are taller than the men in the front rank, because when we go to fire, they're going to have to step over the shoulder of the man in front of them. Good to be tall, I guess, in the rear.
I think we're going to do it a couple times.
So there's a number of different firing commands that I can give depending on the situation. The first one we'll demonstrate is the volley. Now I'll go ahead and say this is going to be a little bit loud. They're far away. It's not going to be too bad. But if anyone is particularly sensitive to loud noises or dogs or anything like that, you might just want to prepare yourself for that. Cover your ears if you feel the need. The volley is kind of that one-hit punch. So if the enemy was attacking us and coming up close, or if we wanted to attack the enemy and get close and sort of blow a hole in their line, we could issue a volley. Firing by company. Ready. Soldiers go back. You hear that click? That's the soldiers taking their hammer back to full cock. It's kind of like taking the musket off safety. Aim! Fire! Whoa! Now, that was great, but we have an obvious problem. We fired a volley, and now we have to wait. And I doubt the Confederates would be polite enough to wait on us, right? So we've got a couple of different things we can do to help keep up a constant fire if necessary. Boy, they're working hard, aren't they?
How long does it usually take to load?
It's a great question. Someone asked, how long does it take to load a musket? Under ideal circumstances, a trained soldier can fire 3 aimed shots in a minute. That's 20 seconds per round. That's under very ideal circumstances. In actual combat, I suspect that number would be closer to 2 rounds per minute, particularly because the muskets produce a lot of fouling. The black powder doesn't burn very efficiently. So the more you fire, the dirtier your musket gets. It gets harder and harder to ram that ball down, so it becomes really a harder job to do. Like I said, so if we wanted to keep up a constant fire on the enemy, we don't have machine guns, right, like the Army does today, but we can do a couple tricks. One of those is firing by file. The idea is we start firing at one end, and if we have a long line, a long regiment of anywhere from 500 to 1,000 men all lined up here, by the time we get to the opposite end of the line, the guy who fired first is already reloaded. We keep up a constant fire. Firing by file. Commence firing. So you get the idea. We've kept up a constant rolling fire.
It's cool.
I think that's another one you can show.
That's not our only trick. Learn about files now. We can fire by rank. Company, firing by rank. Front rank. Ready. Aim. Fire. Recover. Ah, those rebels probably think we fired our volley. Little do they know. Rear rank. Ready. Aim. Fire. Recover. Shoulder. Arm. Into rank. Right. Face. Now, those muskets are a lot of work. And a lot of soldiers took the matter into their own hands to improve their odds. You saw how the... Why don't you step forward here, Doug? You saw how the musket has a paper cartridge. Well, just at the beginning of the Civil War, some new technologies had come out. And that included, once I dig it out here, a self-contained cartridge. Now this looks much like a modern round, right? It's brass. We'd have the powder and the projectile and the primer all in one package. None of this separate pieces that you have to reach for and load and all of this. This was quite expensive technology at the beginning of the Civil War, but a lot of Civil War soldiers took it upon themselves to purchase with their own money these new types of repeating firearms, such as the 1816 Henry, which is this weapon here. Some of you might have seen something similar in cowboy movies, right? You have the lever under there, fire quite rapidly. But this wasn't really something the government invested in. The government needed to expand the army very quickly. They knew that the rifled musket was a safe bet. We can make a lot of those. We're not so sure about the newfangled stuff. But nonetheless, soldiers did feel that their chances were all the better if they invested in this kind of technology. And some of them were even here at the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain. If you'd like to learn more about that, I would invite you to join us at our camp after the demonstration. Thank you. All right, so, attention, company. Shoulder, arms. Present, arms. Thank you all. You've been a wonderful audience. Shoulder, arms.
I'm Colonel of the Cotton States Battalion. Today we have an infantry company here made up out of about 5 different reenactment units that are here today just to give you a bit of an infantry demonstration. These troops are armed and equipped as Army of Tennessee troops would have been armed and equipped in 1864. At the time, 160 years ago, day before yesterday, the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain was fought right here on this ground we're standing on. We're carrying the colors of the 33rd Alabama, which was in Lowry's brigade, Claiborne's division, and we're posted right over there where we're within 150 yards of where they would have fought on that day. So, you know, by that stage of the war, troops were actually digging in. And of course, in the Atlanta campaign, Johnston was highly outnumbered by Sherman's army. It started out about 2 to 1. The Confederates transferred some more people in and got it to about one and a half. Sherman had about 1.5 times the men. So the Confederate engineers were actually preparing lines of work, dropping back to Atlanta that they thought they could defend, but Sherman had so many people, he could match them in the front and then had a sizable maneuvering element. He'd work his way onto one flank or the other, flank the Confederates out of a line. They would fall back to the next prepared line, further reinforce that and try to hold out. So in mid-June to early July of 1864, Johnston was holding this line here, this Kennesaw line. On the 27th of June, Sherman got tired of all the flanking maneuvers, tried a frontal assault, and threw about 8,000 men at a line from right around in here to the dead angle, the salient just down the way, less than a quarter of a mile. The Confederates were able to hold their thin line and repulse the Federals, but were later flanked out of these works, about July 3rd, somewhere along in there. But anyway, they were fighting from trenches at that point, but the way the men were trained and the way that they learned on both sides during the war to fight was to get into this formation right here, which is a two-rank line of battle. You have your front rank, your rear rank, and you've got your files working together down like this. We have about a 22-man company here right now. A full-strength company was 100 men, and 10 companies were formed together into a regiment. A full-strength regiment was about 1,000 men, commanded by a colonel. So if you use your imagination, if you whip this up into 4 times what size it was, it's going to go to down there. If there's 10 of them, a full-strength regimental line in battalion formation would stretch over there, beyond the trees. It's a good long, wide front, about 500 man wide front. By this stage of the war, most of the regiments were probably in the 400 to 700 strength, and so you had them smaller. But they learned these tactics to be able to maneuver, move troops around, and wind up bringing them back into this line of battle, the fighting formation. So use your imagination and multiply by 10 or 20 as you see things going on here. Each man is carrying a rifle musket or a musket of some sort. These are muzzle loading weapons. That was the predominant arm used by infantry throughout the war. They're, as I say, muzzle loading. The men are carrying their ammunition in their cartridge box. Each man has a cartridge box on his right hip. They hold about 40 rounds. They had fixed ammunition with paper cartridges with the ball. It was a paper cartridge which had powder and ball. And then you prime the weapon with a percussion cap, which was in this little pouch right here that you wore on your rifleman's belt. So you can see every man has that. The men are carrying canteens on their left side, along with a haversack, a cloth bag or canvas bag that they would keep their rations in. Let's see, Cap. Let's go ahead and have our firing demonstration here. Well.
Supposed to wait till after the.
Oh, we can hit that.
No, target practice.
Oh, and the ranger said it's live fire. Indeed, it's live powder, but we are not firing musket balls, so rest assured of that. These things are dangerous enough without lead in them.
I should have specified. I said they need a few more supplies. I should have specified.
Let's see, Captain. How about bringing the men to attention and moving them and putting them at the right flank? If you would face them to the right, Captain.
Right flank?
Yep.
Attention,
and the left if you desire. If we were marching to Marietta and we were that big, 400 or 500 man regiment, and we're standing here in line of battle, man forward, march, and off we go. But it'd be really hard to get to downtown Marietta in a battalion front. So the captain has now commanded the men to move to right face. They're now marching by their right flank, and that is a standard march distance formation right there. You can put them back, Captain, and get them back at this. So that way you can move the men, get them from one place to another. Then you can go through various maneuvers depending on how you have to wind up halted at the end to get back into your line of battle and be able to fight. That's just a simple thing there. Are we going to wait till the truck leaves?
Yeah, because I don't know which way it's going to go.
Okay.
Thank you. More.
Let's see. What else?
Flag, Colonel.
You
point out the flag.
I did point out that we were carrying. I believe I pointed out
Yeah,
that we
you
were
did.
carrying the
Alabama?
colors of the 33rd Alabama. That's a Hardy. We call that today a Hardy pattern flag. That is, those flags were made up in Dalton, Georgia, during the winter of '63-'64, and issued. Joe Johnston, after he took command, after Bragg was relieved, one thing he really wanted to do was standardize battle flags. Well, look at here. My family showed up. Hey, Miss Carol. He was trying to standardize battle flags as they had them in Virginia. What really getting the flag like that, which is a rectangular 13-star flag. That is a poke pattern flag. Truck gone? Truck is gone. Yep. All right, flag talk will cease. We'll go on to fire. But he couldn't get enough of those flags. The only troops that weren't carrying some pattern of St. Andrew's cross flag by this stage of the war was Claiborne's division of troops, which were allowed to keep those flags, which they've been carrying since early in the war. So you would have seen these flags in this area, and if you were wearing a federal uniform, you didn't like to see those flags because those were about the best troops in the Army of Tennessee. All right, Captain, if you'll carry on with our firing demonstration.
Very good, sir. Thank you very much.
It's gonna be loud.
It'll be a minute.
Yeah. Hey,
I don't know.
okay. Company, shoulder, palm. Half left. Company, forward, palm.
Captain's now moving them in by the left flank.
Company, palm. Front. Right wheel.
And we're just moving so that we don't fire at you.
Yeah.
For you, not at you. Yes, what?
We're trying to surprise you.
You surprised me. I wasn't expecting to see you trot up here.
Whatever you say, Captain. I want you to push yourselves, all of you to push yourselves later and go enjoy it.
Men were taught about the best you could do with these weapons is 3 rounds a minute. And that's when they're nice and clean. Black powder fouls a musket pretty quickly, makes it hard to ram the cartridges on. But everything they do to load, you're doing within the width of your elbows. The men are standing with the touch of the elbow. So when you load, you bring your piece across like this, reach into your cartridge box, pull out a cartridge, tear the tail off, pour it in, set the ball, draw your rammer in a 2-step process. Keep your elbow out of the other guy's face. Do that, ram your cartridge, turn rammer. Then come up to prime your half face, half cock the weapon. This is a weapon that's hammer broke this morning. My weapon is in there. So you come to half cock, reach into your cap pouch, take out a primer, place it on the cone right here. Then the first time you load, come to the shoulder so that the officer in charge knows you're loaded. There were various firing commands that could be given. You could fire by company or fire by battalion. Everyone in the group fires at once. If you do that, everyone's unloaded, and it's going to be 20 or 30 seconds before people are loaded again and able to put more lead down range. So there's clearing weapons. So they're popping caps to make sure the weapons are clear, so that when they load, there's a better chance that everybody's musket will go off. Men can fire by file, which they would probably do first. That was the most common command used during the war. You would fire by file and do it by battalion. The colonel would command battalion, fire by file. Battalion, ready. Everyone comes up to the ready position, full cocks their musket, commence firing. At that point, in every company, they would start fire from the right of the company to the left and just work down the line. And then until they were given the command to cease fire, they would load and fire at will thereafter. That gets a volume of fire up, keeps it spread out to where somebody's loaded all the time, and keeps a good volume of fire downrange. With all the noise and smoke of battle, just getting them started and let them fight on their own hook is generally more efficient than trying to do a fire command with all the noise and smoke. So as you see, if you had a 50 or 60 man company, they'd still be shooting. The fellows on the right of the line would be getting loaded up again and ready to go. The captain will probably also have the men fire by rank, so you can kind of do a 50-50 deal. You load and fire by rank. Rear rank fires first, then's told to load. When they're about loaded, the captain will command the front rank to fire, and you can alternate fire that way. And then they'll probably finish off with a company vol. And their rear rank fired. They're now reloading. Don't tell them that; they'll get a big hit.
Then they'll start. No, really.
Yes.
What does fire by fire?
Fire by file. It means
Like
that's a
shoot
two
one at
rank.
a
That's a
time?
2-rank line of battle. Why the men in the front are the front rank, and the rear rank, and the files are the depth. Each 2 men there are the file.
Do you think they were spaced out a little bit more? You think they might have been spaced out more?
Sometimes they would fight in sort of things heated up. It would spread out a little naturally, but the deal was to stand there shoulder to shoulder and slug it out.
I could see them like stacked a little bit, and then they jump into fire.
Yes.
Then
No, it's
stack
really
again.
this is all designed for safety. They're fighting in those 2 ranks there. If they stay dressed up on the rear rank, and they do that. Now, as you took casualties from the front rank, the rear rank men are supposed to fill in, and you deplete the rear rank because you're trying to hold the same front that you've got, so you don't squeeze the line down in open caps. You keep plugging people up.
Fire by company.
All right, they'll fire a company volley.
That's everybody.
Aim. Look.
Good volley, boys. Well done. Well, as I say, by this stage, the Army of Tennessee was fighting pretty handily in prepared works, trenches. When Johnston was relieved of command, and John Bell Hood was put in charge, he wound up engaging in some more maneuver and frontal assaults and got the Army chewed up pretty badly, pretty quickly at the Battle of Atlanta and Peachtree Creek, some of those engagements. Hood was always very aggressive. But it became, as the war went on, troops would hardly ever halt and stop any place where they didn't just start digging. There were men that started carrying axes with them and shovels and things like that, so that they had their own implements, not relying on the Pioneer Corps, and they would start going to ground, cutting down trees and piling up dirt to make themselves a place to get out of the fire a little bit.
Yeah, they're coming back. Don't worry, they're not going to get it.
Did they ever build dams and rivers?
Actually, they did build dams and rivers early in the war on the peninsula near Jamestown, Virginia. General Magruder actually flooded some areas to be able to better defend them. I think they're going to go ahead and stack. We're trying to keep from broiling ourselves in the sunshine out here. Does anybody have any questions? I'll be glad to answer questions, not just from my grandchildren.
Before we get to questions, I do just want to say, do my park ranger outro, and that's number 1. Can we please give our volunteers a round of applause, please? Our living historians, reenactors, volunteers, they come. This group in particular